wild. This week, we're talking about plants. I love plants. I've recently started collecting tropical houseplants, but before that, my love of plants really started when I was a kid, like you, and it started with trees. This is a white birch tree behind me. You can tell from its white, papery bark. Let's check out our science graphic real quick. The study of plants falls under the umbrella of biology, and it is called botany. Botany is the study of plants. We're also going to talk about dendrology. Dendrology is a form of botany that focuses specifically on trees. So, if you're ready, let's delve into the amazing world of plants and discover why plants are not boring. Are you ready? Let's go! Today, I want to address this misconception, that means a mistake essentially, that plants are boring. Plants are not boring. Just because they don't run or move in a way that we can see, and they don't have fur or scales, doesn't mean they're not worth looking at and caring about. Here are some examples. Have you heard of carnivorous plants that eat insects, such as the Venus flytrap, the pitcher plant, or the sundew? What about giant flowers that stink like rotting meat, such as the rafflesia, or the corpse lily? Have you heard of the honey fungus? There's a honey fungus that's growing underneath the soil in Oregon that's thought to be the world's largest organism. Its fungal fibers are all connected to each other in a mat underground that is 4 kilometers wide. 4 kilometers! The different parts of a fungal organism spread out something called mycelia to communicate with each other and to grow ever wider. Unfortunately for Oregon, the honey fungus also infects the roots of the trees that it grows underneath and slowly kills them. Or have you heard of Victoria amazonica, which is a giant lily pad? It grows lily pads up to 3 meters across. That's big enough that kids like you can sit on them. Plants are not boring. Another reason plants aren't boring is that they can talk to each other. Now, sometimes in science, there's an idea that creates what's called a controversy. A controversy means that groups of people disagree with each other, usually quite strongly about something. When biologists first discovered that plants might be communicating, that idea caused just such a controversy in the world of science. Nowadays, though, most botanists, remember those are scientists that study plants, believe that plants do communicate with each other in some form. This communication between plants isn't talking like you or I imagine it. It's not even barking like a dog or mooing like a cow. No, plant communication is silent and invisible to us. It usually involves chemical or electrical signals. These chemical and electrical signals can travel from one part of a plant to another part of the same plant saying, hey, this leaf over here is being eaten by a caterpillar, get ready! Or they can be sent between plants that are nearby each other. Plants can defend themselves against insects by making their leaves less tasty using natural chemicals. They can also warn other nearby plants of danger. Plants can even use these chemical signals to bring things like wasps to them to eat the bugs that are eating the plant. If you're interested in learning more about the silent, invisible world of plant communication, I recommend the book, Can You Hear the Trees Talking? Discovering the Hidden Life of the Forest. Every day, plants are engaged in a silent, slow-motion battle for survival. You just have to learn to think in plant time in order to observe it. Okay, now that we've established why plants are definitely worth your time, let's get out in the field and learn about some common plants and tree species in Kingston, Frontenac. So, I want to talk a little bit about ferns. These are all ferns that you see here. A fern is an ancient kind of plant. If you zoom in right here on the leaf, you can see that all of these individual things, these big long ones, they're called fronds. But then you see all these little individual leaves on here. Those are called pinnae. Ferns follow a particular fractal structure where they mirror the larger structure every time they go smaller. So we have a branching structure, and then we have a branching structure, and then a branching structure, and then even on a tinier level inside the leaf we have a branching structure. Ferns are one of the oldest plants, possibly the oldest plant on Earth. Ferns are older than dinosaurs, They're older than flowering plants. They've been around since a period called the Devonian, which is a geological term. About 400 million years ferns have been around. The other cool thing about ferns is that instead of with seeds spreading around, they have something called spores, tiny black dots that usually reside on the underside of their leaves. Ferns are truly incredible, and they usually grow in cool, moist, shady places. Every time I see ferns, I like to pretend that I've gone back in time where the dinosaurs lived. So, the next time you see a bed of beautiful ferns like this, or even a single fern growing in the corner of your garden, make sure to appreciate it for the ancient, beautiful plant that it is. This is a red oak tree. I can tell that by looking up at the shape of its leaves, but some people are good enough to tell trees apart by the texture of their bark. Look at how thickly ridged the bark on this tree is. Also, notice how it's split into two different trunks. Why did that happen, do you think?
Next, I decided to talk to my dad, Jim Boothby, who's a forester and has studied trees his entire life.
So I have over 30 years experience with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry here in Ontario. I've worked in our northern forests in remote communities as a forester, and then I've been working for a long time on giving the government some guidance on protecting the environment in terms of what we do all over the province.
You've talked about how you worked in environmental stewardship. So
right.
What is stewardship?
Stewardship is this gentle hand to look after the forests and everything else that inhabits or lives or uses the forest. We have to be mindful of all those things while we're operating to maybe build a road in the forest. And it's thinking and planning before you do. There is a large planning process we follow in Ontario before we harvest a single tree. We have to identify those trees we think we can take out of the forest, and we also have to regard the fact that trees are used by creatures of many types of the forest and they have to be left. We only take the ones that we think we're going to be able to use. And we also have to remember that those forests are renewable, which means they will grow back. So we cut them and those trees, those forests will grow back, unlike other resources.
Yes, so forestry and foresters help us to harvest wood and harvest trees in a renewable way. So that helps to protect and sustain our forests. So foresters actually have a really important role in between the sort of, protecting the forests and using the forests. Okay, so in your multiple jobs as a forester, what kinds of things did you actually do?
I was out actually planting the trees myself, planting the different tree species in southern Ontario. In northern Ontario, I would measure what other people did in terms of planting trees. We'd also look at how fast they were growing. We also measured the soil quality and what type of soil it was. We'd also manage large areas in northern Ontario for wildlife and put them aside to be not harvested for timber.
And so on Words from the Wild, we talk a lot about observations and data. So would you say that you made some observations and recorded data as a forester?
Yes, very much part of being a forester is understanding the growth rate of forests and the different species within those forests. So we would actually have special techniques where we would go measure the height and the diameter of the trees.
Wonder what he means by that? This is an experiment you can do yourself. How to find the age of a tree without cutting it down. First, find a measuring tape that is bendy and can wrap around a tree trunk. Wrap it around the trunk of the tree at around 4.5 feet up. That might be above your head, and you might need a grown-up to help you measure at that height. Record that measurement. All the way around the outside of the tree is called the circumference. What we need to know, though, is called the diameter. The diameter is how far across the tree is right in the middle of that circle. Now, how we find the diameter from the circumference is a little bit of advanced math, so you might need a calculator for this.
we're going to divide the circumference by something called pi, the number 3.14. You can get your grown-up to help you with this too. The number that you get then is the diameter. That's how far across the tree is in the middle. Next, you need to multiply the diameter of that tree by what is called its growth rate. The growth factor rate has been determined to be different depending on the species of tree. For example, a red oak has a growth factor rate of 4, but a sugar maple has a growth factor rate of 5. I'll put up a list of Ontario's most common trees here, along with their growth factor rates. However, the real difficult part here for us Canadians is that the growth factor chart actually only works if you measure in inches. Luckily, most measuring tapes have centimeters and inches on them, so this shouldn't be a problem. So, let's do an example. Say you find a white pine tree. You measure its circumference in inches and you find that it's 34.54 inches all the way around. Then, you divide by pi, 3.14. 34.54 divided by 3.14 means that its diameter, that's across the middle, is 11 inches. So if my tree is 11 inches in diameter, then I look up the growth factor chart. I see that a white pine has a growth factor of 5. I multiply 11 by 5, and I find out that this white pine tree is approximately 55 years old. This math is definitely more advanced than most of you will have done, but if you really want to know how old a tree is without cutting it down, try it out. Of course, the other way to tell a tree's age is after it's been cut down. When you see an exposed stump, you can count the rings. Each ring in a tree's stump represents 1 year of growth, approximately. You can also tell what the weather or environmental conditions were like each year that the tree was alive, depending on how thick each ring is. A bunch of tiny, thin rings clustered close together means that it was a few really hard years for the tree. It didn't get a lot of nutrients, so it didn't grow very much. And thick, broad rings show that the tree had a good year, with lots of water, nutrients in the soil, and sunlight to grow. Of course, for these tactics to work, you have to be able to identify what kind of tree you're looking at. So next, let's take a look at some common trees that you might see in Kingston, Frontenac. Okay, so this is our first tree. What tree is this?
This is the sugar maple or hard maple.
Okay, and how would a forester or a dendrologist identify this tree?
It has single leaves attached to the stem. The leaf is basically has 5 points, and it produces keys in pairs. And when they're released from the tree, they'll helicopter down to the ground.
Awesome! And is this a deciduous or a coniferous tree?
This is a deciduous tree, and what that means is come the fall and it gets cold, these leaves will change color and then fall off.
Okay, and what's the opposite of a deciduous tree?
The opposite of the deciduous tree is a coniferous tree, which produces needles. And they can withstand cold temperatures, so they stay on all year. This is the white pine. It's Ontario's official provincial tree. It has needles instead of leaves, and the needles will stay on the tree all year round. White pine has soft needles in many clusters of 5 that if you look closely you can count and see them. The other thing it does is it produces a cone, and these cones for white pine are quite large. They're about 10 centimeters long. This is a red oak. And you can again see here that there's single leaves, but you can see that the leaves have various points at the end, sharp points. They're not actually sharp to the touch. This tree can live to be hundreds of years old, and it produces acorns. This again is a coniferous tree. You can see it has needles. So these are on the tree all year round. This is a white spruce tree, and it has single needles Unlike the white pine, which had clusters, these are single needles. It also produces a cone, but these cones are very small. They're only like 5 centimeters long. These are ash trees, specifically white ash trees. White ash trees have got a long leaf with multiple leaflets. This is the ash leaf, and it's attached here at the stalk, and you can see the stem, but it has multiple tiny leaflets that are a part of the leaf, this one leaf. That's one leaf.
And this tree, those brown spots on it are not normal, right?
These are fungus caused by hot weather
Ah, okay.
that are typical in ashes all over Ontario.
It has been pretty hot this summer, hasn't it?
Yes.
Well, that's it for this week. Thank you so much to my dad, Jim, the forester, for helping us out with learning about how to identify trees. If you want to learn more about plants and trees, I have some resources to recommend. YouTube channels, you can check out SciShow Kids. SciShow Kids has a whole playlist of just plant-themed science videos aimed at younger kids even than this program, and I'll link it in the description below. In addition to Can You Hear the Trees Talking?, I recommend the Smithsonian's collections of trees, leaves, flowers, and seeds, a visual encyclopedia of the plant kingdom. It is incredibly comprehensive, and also just a beautiful hardcover book. Also, I Love This Tree by Anna Claiborne. It really taps into that relationship that you can have with a tree that always stays in one place and you watch it grow and change over your whole lifetime. Botanicum by K.J. Willis and Katie Scott. Remember that botany is the study of plants, so the Botanicum is like a compendium of botany. Also, The Magic Mystery of Trees by Jen Green, and the ever-popular Mushroom Fan Club by Elise Graval. And it's a short, silly, almost graphic novel-style book that is still non-fiction and teaches you all about Ontario mushrooms. It is incredibly good. For your challenge this week, I challenge you to find and identify all 5 tree species that were mentioned in this video. Sugar maple, white pine, red oak, white spruce, and ash. If you want a special bonus, you can find my 3 favorite trees. White birch, which is this one behind me. Hemlock, that's a coniferous tree that has soft, flat needles and beautiful drooping branches. And the weeping willow. The weeping willow, Latin name Salix babylonica, is not actually native to Ontario. It's so common around here that most people assume that it is, but it actually was an ornamental tree that got loose and then was just so successful that now we see it everywhere. However, even though it's a non-native tree, it's still my favorite tree, because as a kid, it's the tree that made me love plants. Its beautiful hanging, swaying branches made me think of elves and fairy forests and magic. And I was enchanted by the weeping willow. It made me want to love trees and take care of them. If you want to talk more about trees and plants and mushrooms, or even just any nature questions at all, join me on Monday for Words from the Wild live from the 500s. I also realized I have yet to explain why I've called it Live from the 500s. Well, it's a library joke. See, in the Dewey Decimal System, we organize data based on topic, and each topic gets a number. The 500s in the Dewey Decimal System are the natural sciences books. So if I'm live from the 500s, that means that I am in the natural sciences section of the library's nonfiction collection. Clever, right? So join me on Monday and we'll learn even more about plants and trees. That's all for today. Stay wild, everybody!